It was supposed to be a normal day on live television, a regular episode of It's Supernatural. With Sid Roth. The cameras were rolling, the audience was buzzing, and everything seemed perfectly routine. But what happened next stunned millions and left viewers across the world speechless. Jonathan Roumie, known for his calm demeanor and spiritual presence, walked onto the set. To anyone watching, he looked unassuming, just a quiet man sitting across from the host. But there was something different in the air that day, something powerful and intangible, something you could feel even through the screen. Sid Roth, the host, welcomed him with a warm smile, introducing him to the audience as an actor, a man of faith, and someone whose spiritual life had touched countless hearts. The crowd clapped, cameras panned, and the show began as usual. Yet, behind Jonathan's calm smile, a quiet intensity lingered, a force that nobody could anticipate. As Jonathan started to speak, describing moments of faith, divine encounters, and personal transformation, the energy in the studio subtly shifted. The lights didn't dim, nothing seemed unusual at first, but there was a heaviness in the room, a tension that whispered, something extraordinary is about to happen. Then it happened. Sid Roth, who had been listening intently, suddenly froze. His eyes widened, and before anyone could react, he collapsed, right there on live television. Gasps erupted from the audience. Staff rushed forward, some grabbing microphones, others trying to understand what had just occurred. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every stunned expression, every whispered word, every heartbeat of the moment. For viewers at home, the scene was shocking. Social media erupted instantly. Clips went viral, comments flooded in, and millions tried to comprehend what they had just seen. Some called it a fainting spell, others said it was a spiritual encounter, but one thing was undeniable: this was not an ordinary television moment. Something had broken through the normal, mundane world and reached everyone watching, leaving them in awe. Jonathan Roumie remained calm, composed, and serene. He didn't panic, he didn't shout, he simply stayed present. And in that stillness, the audience sensed a truth that words couldn't capture. Something beyond human understanding had entered the room, a force of faith, of divine presence, of power quietly contained in a humble man's heart. And in those first few seconds, nobody realized that what they were witnessing would go down in television history. A moment that would shock, inspire, and change millions forever. It was a crisp morning on the set of It's Supernatural, a show millions tuned into weekly for stories of faith, miracles, and divine encounters. The studio was buzzing with energy as crew members made last-minute adjustments to cameras, lights, and microphones. Sid Roth, the host, was in his element, smiling, chatting with the audience, checking cues, and radiating the warmth that had made him a beloved figure in the spiritual community for decades. Into this familiar setting walked Jonathan Roumie, an actor best known for his calm demeanor, his deep spirituality, and his portrayal of Jesus on a popular series. But beyond the accolades and the roles, Jonathan carried something far more profound, a presence that was quiet but impossible to ignore. He wasn't flashy, he didn't command attention with words or gestures. Yet, somehow, he drew it anyway. Sid rose to greet him. "Jonathan, it's so good to have you here," he said, his smile broad and welcoming. "Our viewers at home are going to love hearing from you today." The cameras panned across the audience, capturing faces of anticipation, curiosity, and excitement. They had come for a conversation about faith, transformation, and miracles, but what they were about to witness was far beyond ordinary expectation. Jonathan approached the chair across from Sid, his movements deliberate, calm, and unhurried. He greeted the host with a quiet nod and a warm smile. He carried no props, no scripts, no pretense, just himself. The contrast between him and the often boisterous energy of a live show was stark. While the crew adjusted lights and tested microphones, Jonathan simply sat, radiating a composed intensity that seemed to fill the room. As Sid began the interview, the questions were simple, the tone familiar. "Tell us about your journey of faith, Jonathan," he said. "How has spirituality guided you through your life, and what can viewers at home learn from your experience?" Jonathan nodded, a serene smile on his face, and began to speak. But even in these first few moments, there was a shift in the atmosphere. Nothing obvious, nothing dramatic, but something subtle, the kind of energy that makes the hair on your neck stand on end. The crew may have thought it was nerves or excitement, the audience may have chalked it up to anticipation, but anyone paying close attention would have noticed a quiet, almost electric tension in the room. Jonathan spoke with humility, describing his experiences with faith, prayer, and surrender to God. His voice was soft, yet it carried weight, resonance, and authority. It wasn't the kind of authority that demands attention, it was the kind that naturally commands it. Every word seemed to linger in the air, every pause seemed to draw the listeners deeper into his presence. Sid listened intently, leaning forward slightly, nodding, encouraging him to continue. But then, something unusual happened. The calmness in Jonathan's demeanor seemed to grow, radiating outward. The room, once just a studio full of people and lights, began to feel different. The air felt heavier, thicker, not oppressive, but charged. People would later describe it as a moment when the spiritual world seemed to brush against the physical, when ordinary reality felt temporarily suspended. The live audience, unaware of what was about to happen, watched in rapt attention. Some leaned forward in their seats, curious about the story. Some whispered to neighbors, commenting on the intensity they sensed without understanding why. And some, in the back rows, simply stared, sensing something extraordinary, something beyond explanation, was quietly building. Jonathan began to share a story from his personal life, a moment when faith had been tested, when surrender to God had brought clarity, healing, and peace. His words weren't dramatic, but they carried a power that could not be ignored. The camera captured close-ups of the audience, their expressions shifting from curiosity to awe. Some held their breath. Some eyes widened. The studio was silent, except for Jonathan's voice, soft, calm, and steady. Sid Roth, always a man of faith himself, listened carefully, nodding along. But even he, experienced as he was, would soon be unprepared for what was coming next. At first, there was a subtle change, a momentary wobble in his posture, a sudden pause in his smile. Crew members behind the cameras noticed it almost immediately, exchanging nervous glances. Sid's hand trembled slightly as he gestured toward Jonathan, as if he were acknowledging something powerful that words could not express. And then the atmosphere shifted again. The calmness radiating from Jonathan grew more palpable. It was no longer just a presence in the room, it was a force, an undeniable weight of spiritual intensity. The audience, still unaware of what would happen next, leaned forward instinctively, sensing something extraordinary, something historic, was about to unfold. For Jonathan, it was just another moment of surrender. For the viewers, it was the calm before a storm. For Sid Roth, it was a prelude to an experience that would leave him overwhelmed, humbled, and forever changed. And for millions watching at home, the ordinary studio, with its cameras, lights, and chairs, was about to become the setting for a moment that no one could have predicted, and no one would ever forget. The studio had become a place of quiet tension. Jonathan Roumie's presence seemed to fill every corner, every seat, every camera angle. The audience sat on the edge of their chairs, captivated, some even leaning forward instinctively, as if drawn into something far bigger than themselves. Sid Roth, the host, was smiling, nodding, listening, but the calm intensity emanating from Jonathan was beginning to penetrate even his seasoned, spiritual heart. Jonathan spoke softly about moments when faith had been tested, describing the power of surrender, of trusting in something beyond the physical world. His words weren't loud or dramatic, they didn't need to be. There was a subtle force in his voice, a quiet authority that made listeners pay attention, almost involuntarily. The cameras captured close-ups of the audience's faces, eyes widening, jaws tightening, breaths held. Some looked at Jonathan with awe, others glanced at Sid with uncertainty. Something was about to happen, something nobody could have anticipated. Sid Roth had experienced many profound moments on live television before. He had seen healings, witnessed miracles, and interviewed countless individuals whose lives had been changed by faith. But even for him, Jonathan's presence was different. There was a weight in the air, almost tangible, a sense that the ordinary rules of reality were bending. His body, normally steady, began to respond. A subtle tremor ran through his hands. He shifted in his seat, his smile flickering for a moment. Crew members in the back of the studio noticed the change immediately, exchanging worried glances. Then, it happened. Without warning, Sid Roth's posture faltered. His hand reached instinctively toward the armrest, but it wasn't enough. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, his legs gave way. A sharp gasp escaped the audience. Cameras pivoted, zooming in on Sid as he collapsed, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and awe. The studio erupted in chaos. Staff members leapt from their seats, rushing toward him to offer support, while the audience cried out in alarm and disbelief. Jonathan remained calm, serene, and unshaken. He did not move quickly, did not panic. He simply leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady, a small, knowing smile on his face. There was no arrogance in his reaction, only presence, a quiet, unshakable authority that seemed to anchor the storm around him. Viewers at home gasped as the live feed captured every second of the moment, the shock, the confusion, and the raw humanity of the event. The camera caught the audience's reactions. Some people were frozen, hands over their mouths, wide-eyed. Others were whispering frantically to neighbors. A few were on their phones, recording the extraordinary event as it unfolded. Crew members scrambled, some trying to shield Sid from the fall, others gesturing frantically toward production staff to keep the broadcast live. The entire studio was buzzing with energy, a chaotic mixture of concern, awe, and fear. Sid Roth, for all his experience, was overwhelmed. His body had been physically affected, but his mind was racing to understand the moment. It wasn't fainting, at least not in the ordinary sense. It was as if the weight of the spiritual presence in the room had pressed upon him, testing his limits, pushing him beyond the comfort of the familiar. His audience, his staff, and millions watching at home could only witness in stunned silence. Jonathan spoke again, quietly, without urgency. "Faith is not just a feeling," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It is a surrender, a willingness to allow something greater to move through you. Sometimes, we experience it in ways we cannot anticipate." His words carried weight, but it was the presence behind them that truly captivated the studio. There was no force, no demand, just an undeniable energy that seemed to demand acknowledgement. Crew members helped Sid to a chair, supporting him carefully as he regained his composure. The audience was silent now, absorbing the intensity of what they had just witnessed. Some whispered, "I've never felt anything like this before," while others stared at Jonathan with awe, struggling to put into words the depth of what had just unfolded. Social media was already erupting with live clips, comments, and theories. Millions were watching the broadcast unfold in real time, trying to grasp the significance of the moment. Even as Sid Roth recovered physically, the emotional and spiritual impact lingered. He looked at Jonathan, still seated calmly, and nodded, a mixture of respect, amazement, and humility on his face. The audience, sensing the gravity of the moment, remained quiet, letting the energy in the room settle slowly. Everyone understood that something extraordinary had occurred, something beyond ordinary explanation, something that would be talked about, analyzed, and remembered for years to come. And in those moments, it became clear, Jonathan Roumie hadn't just shared a story. He hadn't just given an interview. He had created an encounter, one that revealed the depth of faith, the power of presence, and the extraordinary ways in which the spiritual can intersect with the physical. Millions of viewers at home would later replay the clip, trying to process the event, while those in the studio had witnessed firsthand a moment that could only be described as life-changing. The room slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the energy remained. Everyone knew they had experienced something rare, something profound, and something unforgettable. And as Jonathan continued to speak softly, calmly, and confidently, it was clear that this was only the beginning of a moment that would ripple far beyond the studio walls. The studio was silent now, but it wasn't the calm of an ordinary pause. It was a charged, electric stillness, the kind of quiet that follows something extraordinary, something that defies explanation. Sid Roth sat in his chair, supported by crew members, blinking as if trying to reconcile what had just happened. His usually steady voice trembled slightly as he whispered, "Jonathan, what just happened?" Jonathan Roumie remained calm, his expression serene, his presence unshaken. He leaned back slightly, his hands resting lightly on his knees, and spoke in that same quiet, commanding tone. "Sometimes, the presence of faith is stronger than we expect. It can move through us, beyond control, beyond understanding. It is not meant to frighten, it is meant to awaken." The audience, still processing the event, erupted into murmurs. Some whispered prayers, others shook their heads in disbelief. Cameras captured every reaction. Wide eyes, open mouths, hands pressed to hearts, some even wiping away tears. It wasn't fear that hung in the air, it was awe, a profound awareness that they had just witnessed something far beyond the ordinary. Crew members glanced at each other, exchanging astonished looks. One producer muttered under his breath, I've never seen anything like this in all my years of live television. Social media feeds were already flooding with clips of the moment. Within minutes, millions of viewers at home were replaying the segment, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Comments ranged from shocked disbelief to spiritual affirmation. Is this real? I feel it too. I've never experienced anything like this. Sid Roth slowly regained his composure, sitting upright with the support of his staff. His face, a mixture of shock, humility, and wonder, turned toward Jonathan. I've hosted thousands of guests, he said, his voice quieter than usual. I've seen miracles and healings, but this is something I've never experienced before. Jonathan nodded, his expression unchanging. The spiritual world doesn't always work the way we expect. Sometimes it comes quietly. Sometimes it comes in ways that challenge our understanding. But it is always real. And it is always transformative for those who are open to it. At that moment, the studio seemed to hold its breath again. The audience leaned forward, the tension palpable. Even the crew, usually so accustomed to controlled, rehearsed environments, seemed rooted to the spot, aware that this was no ordinary broadcast. For a few heartbeats, time itself seemed suspended. Then came the first wave of whispers from the audience. Did he just? I can't believe this. It's like something moved him. People began exchanging looks, some nodding, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Phones were raised, recording everything for posterity. Every reaction was a testament to the magnitude of the moment, a shared experience that no one would forget. Sid Roth, now fully alert, looked around the room, his hands clasped together. I don't know how to describe it, he admitted, voice trembling with honesty. I felt the power of God in many ways, but today it was overwhelming. Jonathan, I don't think words can capture what just happened. Jonathan smiled faintly, his eyes calm yet piercing. Faith is often beyond words, he said. It isn't something we control or predict. It comes when hearts are ready and when the moment is right. Today was one of those moments. As the realization settled in, a deeper awareness began to ripple through the studio. The crew, the audience, even Sid himself, understood that what they had witnessed was not just a display of spiritual power, it was a revelation. Something profound had entered the room, leaving a mark that would linger long after the cameras stopped rolling. Outside the studio, viewers online were in an uproar. Clips of the moment went viral instantly. Millions shared the video, each reaction a mixture of awe, disbelief, and inspiration. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a life-changing spiritual encounter. One thing was undeniable. Jonathan Roumie's calm presence had created an unforgettable moment, one that transcended ordinary experience. Sid Roth, still recovering, looked at Jonathan with newfound respect. I've interviewed countless people about faith, he said softly, but today, I think I've truly seen it come alive. The audience in the studio erupted into applause, some standing, some crying, all moved by the shared recognition that something extraordinary had occurred. Jonathan remained seated, quiet, humble, and composed. In that calmness, he spoke the final words for the moment. True faith is quiet, yet powerful. It moves silently, yet leaves an impact that can never be erased. For everyone in the room, and for the millions watching around the world, it was clear. This was a moment that would be remembered forever. A moment when the ordinary had been pierced by the extraordinary, leaving all who witnessed it changed, humbled, and inspired. The studio had returned to a semblance of order, but the energy inside was far from normal. Sid Roth, usually the composed and seasoned host, sat quietly, still processing the extraordinary event. Crew members were moving cautiously around him, but even their movements were subdued, as if they, too, felt the lingering weight of what had just unfolded. The audience, once buzzing with whispered speculation, now watched in a state of reverent silence. Everyone understood. What they had just witnessed wasn't ordinary, and it wasn't something that could be dismissed or forgotten. Jonathan Roumie remained calm, seated with his hands resting lightly on his knees. His presence, serene, humble, and powerful, had shifted the entire room. He didn't need to speak loudly or dramatically. His quiet composure carried more weight than any words could. Yet, when he finally addressed the room again, his voice was soft but unmistakable. Faith isn't always about grand gestures, he said, nor is it about what we can see or control. True faith moves in ways that are often invisible, quiet, and unexpected. But when it manifests, it leaves a mark that cannot be erased. Today, we all witnessed one such moment. The audience absorbed his words, nodding, some with tears streaming down their faces. Sid Roth, still seated, looked up at Jonathan, awe and humility etched across his features. "Jonathan," he said, voice shaking slightly, "I've hosted thousands of guests, witnessed countless miracles, and shared hundreds of stories of faith, but I've never experienced anything like this. You've shown us something extraordinary today, something that goes beyond words." Jonathan smiled faintly. "The extraordinary often comes quietly," he replied. "It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It simply moves through those who are open to it, leaving an impact far greater than we can imagine. Faith is the same. It's not always visible, but it is always powerful." The studio audience began to applaud softly, some standing, some wiping away tears. It wasn't applause for Jonathan as a person, nor for Sid, nor for the cameras rolling. It was a collective acknowledgement of something larger than the studio, something beyond the ordinary. It was recognition of the moment itself, a moment that transcended entertainment, a moment that touched the heart, the mind, and the spirit. Social media, meanwhile, was exploding. Clips of Sid Roth collapsing, Jonathan's calm composure, and the audience's reactions went viral almost instantly. Millions of viewers shared the footage, each reacting with awe, disbelief, and deep reflection. The comments poured in, "I can feel this energy even through my screen. Faith is more powerful than I ever imagined. I've never seen anything like this before. It feels real." Back in the studio, Sid Roth stood slowly, supported by crew members. His expression had softened, replaced by a profound humility. "Today was a reminder," he said, turning to the audience, "that faith isn't about what we think we control. It's about surrender, about openness, and about the willingness to let something greater move through us. Jonathan showed us that in a way I'll never forget." Jonathan nodded, his eyes calm and steady. "The lessons of faith are simple," he said. "Respect it, honor it, and be open to it. True power isn't about force or spectacle. It's about presence, humility, and the ability to let the divine flow through you. We don't have to understand it fully. We just need to be willing to experience it." The audience erupted in applause again, louder this time. Some people were standing, some were hugging neighbors, others were silently reflecting, and many were recording the moment to remember it forever. Even the crew, usually focused on technical details, felt the emotional weight of the experience settle within them. They had witnessed something rare, something unforgettable, and it would stay with them long after the cameras stopped rolling. Sid Roth, now fully composed, turned to Jonathan one last time. "Thank you for reminding all of us," he said softly, "that the most powerful moments in life are often quiet, unexpected, and deeply transformative. Today wasn't just a show, it was a lesson in faith, humility, and presence. Something none of us will ever forget." Jonathan's calm smile lingered. "Faith works quietly, but its impact is immense. Remember, it's not the spectacle that matters, it's the openness of your heart. Stay humble, stay present, and be ready for moments that will change you in ways you cannot imagine." As the applause continued, the cameras captured every face in the studio, every tear, every hand held in awe, every silent reflection. The moment had passed, but the lesson remained. True faith is powerful, true humility is transformative, and sometimes the most extraordinary events are revealed quietly, through presence, calm, and an unwavering heart. And for the millions watching at home, the message was clear. Life's most profound moments often come when you least expect them. They don't announce themselves. They don't ask for permission. They simply move, leaving an indelible mark on anyone willing to witness and receive it. The cameras continued rolling, but the studio was no longer just a set. It had become a place of reflection, awe, and transformation. Sid Roth, still seated after the unexpected collapse, looked around the room, eyes wide with humility and wonder. Crew members, audience members, and staff were slowly regaining their composure, but an unspoken understanding lingered in the air. This was more than a television moment. It was an experience that would be remembered for a lifetime. Jonathan Roumie remained seated, calm and composed, radiating the quiet strength that had both unnerved and inspired the room. His presence was magnetic, yet gentle. It drew attention without demand, influenced hearts without force, and reminded everyone in that room of something they often forget in the chaos of daily life. True power is silent, and true respect is earned, not claimed. Sid Roth finally spoke, his voice steady but reflective. Today, I witnessed a moment that words cannot fully capture. Millions are watching this broadcast at home, and I want them to understand something important. What we just experienced wasn't about drama. It wasn't about performance. It was about the presence of faith, humility, and awareness, and the way those qualities can move through us in ways we cannot anticipate. Jonathan nodded. Exactly, he said softly. Faith doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek attention or applause. It comes quietly, subtly, yet its impact can change lives. The lessons we take from these moments are not always obvious, but they are always profound. And the most powerful change begins in hearts that are willing to witness, to reflect, and to act with openness and humility. The audience, now fully attentive, listened in silence. Some whispered prayers, some stared in awe, and some quietly reflected on the lessons they had just received. The energy in the room was almost tangible, a shared awareness that something extraordinary had occurred, and that it wasn't confined to the studio walls, it had reached millions around the world. Moments like this, Jonathan continued, are reminders that respect and humility are not about who you are or what you have achieved. They are about how you treat others, how you remain open to experiences beyond yourself, and how you allow grace to move through you. When we stay present and humble, we open ourselves to moments that can transform our lives, and the lives of those around us, in ways we could never imagine. Sid Roth turned to the audience, a warm smile spreading across his face. I want everyone watching this to think about that. Think about moments in your own life where humility and presence could make a difference. Think about the ways you treat others when you believe no one is watching. Because sometimes, the person you overlook or underestimate might just be the one to teach you the greatest lesson of all. Jonathan added, and that's why these moments matter. Not just for the people in the room, not just for the cameras rolling, but for every single person watching at home. The lessons are for all of us. The question is, will we notice them? Will we be ready to receive them? Will we act with humility, respect, and faith when life presents us with extraordinary opportunities? The applause began softly, then grew louder, swelling through the studio. People stood, some wiping tears from their eyes, others nodding with understanding. Even the crew, usually focused on technical details, found themselves moved, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and gratitude. Sid Roth smiled at Jonathan and then looked into the camera, addressing viewers directly. If this moment touched you, if it inspired you, if it reminded you of the power of faith and humility, I want you to engage with it. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your reflections. Tell us how this moment speaks to you. And remember, the true lesson isn't just watching, it's living it. Jonathan concluded with a final, quiet reminder. Faith, humility, and respect are not seasonal. They are not for show. They are daily practices, guiding principles, and silent strengths. When we embrace them, we create spaces where extraordinary moments can occur, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Don't wait for the world to show you miracles. Be the space where miracles happen. The cameras captured one final sweep of the audience, the crew, Sid Roth, and Jonathan. The energy, though calming, remained palpable, a reminder that something transformative had taken place. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the live broadcast, but the message lingered. The lessons of faith, humility, and presence were now etched into the hearts of all who had witnessed it. For millions watching at home, it was clear. Life's most extraordinary moments often come quietly, without warning. They don't shout. They don't demand recognition. But they move in ways that leave permanent marks on the soul. And the question for each viewer was simple. Would they notice? Would they allow themselves to be changed? And so, the invitation was extended, to reflect, to engage, to act with humility, and to witness the extraordinary in the ordinary. Type faith in the comments if you believe in the power of humility and presence. Share where you're watching from, and tell us what this moment taught you. Let's create a community that honors the quiet power of faith, the strength of humility, and the beauty of being present. Because sometimes, the smallest actions and the calmest people have the greatest impact. The lights in the studio dimmed, but the energy from what had just unfolded lingered. It wasn't just the cameras or the audience, It was the invisible, undeniable presence of something far greater than ordinary life. Everyone who had witnessed it knew that this wasn't just another television episode. It was a lesson in faith, humility, and the power of quiet strength, a reminder that the most extraordinary moments often arrive in the most unexpected ways. Jonathan Roumie, calm and composed as ever, leaned back and looked around the studio. There was no fanfare, no declaration, only presence. And in that stillness, the moral of the story became clear. True power is silent, and true respect is earned, not demanded. The world often teaches us to chase recognition, to seek attention, or to assert dominance, but moments like this reveal a different truth. Influence doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers, touches hearts, and leaves a permanent mark without anyone noticing immediately. Sid Roth, still visibly moved, looked toward Jonathan. "I think we often forget," he said softly, "that respect isn't just for those we admire or those in positions of authority. It's for everyone. Every interaction, every gesture, every word carries weight. And today reminded me, sometimes, the person we least expect holds a lesson we desperately need." The audience, both in the studio and online, began to reflect. Social media lit up with viewers sharing personal stories, experiences of humility, and times they had witnessed or participated in quiet, powerful moments. The message resonated universally. Humility and respect aren't situational, they are constants. Whether in the spotlight or behind the scenes, they shape how we move through the world and how the world responds to us. Jonathan spoke one final time, his words simple but profound. Life doesn't wait for grand gestures or dramatic displays. It asks for our presence, our openness, and our willingness to let grace flow through us. When we act with humility, when we show respect without expectation, we create space for extraordinary things to happen, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Faith, presence, and quiet strength, they are gifts we can all practice every day. And in that quiet, reflective moment, it was clear why millions had been captivated. This wasn't just about a collapse on live television. It wasn't about shock, spectacle, or viral clips. It was about the enduring truth that humility and respect are far more powerful than arrogance, and presence is far stronger than noise. For viewers at home, the lesson was unmistakable. Treat others with kindness, honor the quiet moments, and never underestimate the power of a humble heart. The person you overlook today might be the one who transforms your world tomorrow. The opportunities for grace, inspiration, and change are everywhere, but they only reach those willing to notice. So, take a moment to reflect. Type respect in the comments if you believe that humility and presence are real strength. Share where you're watching from. And remember, the world doesn't reward arrogance, it responds to humility, kindness, and quiet courage. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments in life are the ones we never saw coming.